Good afternoon. Welcome to the First Nations News Podcast. My name is Peter Harris. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're sitting on. We are currently sitting on Whadjuk, Noongar, Boodja, so I would like to acknowledge traditional owners, elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge traditional owners all around Australia from wherever you're watching. Today we are joined by the effervescent Liza Fraser-Gooda, who's going to share some of her story and some of the great work she's been doing in community and business-wise. So welcome, Liza. Thank you for coming. How are you today?
Hi, Peter. Super excited to be on set for your first ever First Nations podcast. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. So let's start off. Obviously, me personally, I know a little bit about your story, but for some of our guests, let's start off with a bit of your background. I know you're a proud Bidjara woman, but you do have connections elsewhere. So how about we just give us a little bit of a rundown on where you're from and some of your early career?
Sure. I am a proud Bidjara Ghangulu Iman woman, originally from Rockhampton, the land of the Darumbal Nation, but been living on Whadjuk, Boodja since 2003. So I feel it's my home away from home. I am a early career. What would you like to know?
Obviously, personally, I know that you're mixed up in a few different businesses and a couple of foundations that are doing great work in the community. You don't just land there. You've obviously got a professional background. So what's some of that early career that sort of shaped you, some of your role models that have helped you land on your feet doing some of the work that you're doing now?
Okay, so early career, I would say that I'm a businesswoman. So I started my first business back in 1998. Yeah. I was in a business partnership with another Aboriginal woman, Mullinjali woman, Dina Paulson. Together we created Australia's first Aboriginal women's calendar. So at that time, there was no Aboriginal representation or Indigenous representation of our mob in, the fashion or in magazines or on the catwalks. And it was an interesting time. I had a younger sister who wanted to be a model. So she was living in Melbourne at the time and going to all these modelling agencies and she was knocked back. So I could see that she was depleted in her spirit and I didn't want that for her. So as a big sister, I thought, let's go and create our own calendar to showcase the beauty of us as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women in Australia. So that was one of the the drive to pursue business. As a young girl growing up, I've always wanted to do business. I was in high school and I went to a private school called the Range Convent, and I saw all my rich friends and I was asking them, how do you get, you live in this beautiful home, you go on these overseas holidays, you've got, all these nice latest trends and, Walkmans and CD disc players. And I just wanted to know what their family did. So I asked the question of what their parents do, and they said they own this business or dad's a CEO of this company. And I thought that's something that I wanted to be growing up. So, which led to the Janali calendar, and going through that was an awesome time because we got to, co-produce 2 Australian calendars featuring Aboriginal women and featuring in Vogue, Clio, Cosmo, FHM, doing the Melbourne Fashion Week, walking in the mall in the Brisbane Mall, and also through those other experiences, I've also was a part of the Dreamtime project, which took our girls to New York, where we opened the New York Fashion Week in collaboration with an Australian designer. So through that led me into coming over to Perth.
Yep.
My business partner at the time, Dina, fell in love with a German comedian and then went to Germany. I had connections. My Uncle Michael was living in Perth at the time, and also connection with Barry,
Yep.
my former husband and business partner still. And that was one of the reasons I came over to Perth. So from Perth, we just created Red Spear and Red Spear Safety, and then went on to SafeSpear.
So, wow, obviously early career, you've always been an entrepreneur, always been a businesswoman, business person. From, some of that stuff I think people wouldn't realise. Early career, New York Fashion Show, Vogue. These are some big events, obviously exposure for our young women. In those early days, going through that transition, some of the challenges. I mean, I personally, business is not easy, and there are some challenges. For you as a young Aboriginal woman in the business world, especially in that business world, were there any challenges along the way you had to navigate, and how did you attack those or take them on?
Yeah, when Dina and I started Janelli Productions back in 1998, you're looking at small business. There was only a handful.
Yeah.
To now where our business economy is, in Australia, I believe we've got over 13,000 businesses that are here, that we generate $16 billion that contributes to our economy. When you look back 20 years ago or 26 years ago, we didn't really have any guidance or any support from a business, small business scenario to what everyone gets now from, Indigenous Business Australia.
Yep.
You've got your Chamber of Commerce that provides all that business supports as well. So it was really challenging. We were two Aboriginal women that had this, dream of creating the calendar. But at the same time, we didn't have that support in terms of showing us the way or, how to do a business plan or how to do a marketing plan or, cash modelling and, how to distribute our calendars. So it was really challenging, but as resilient as we are as First Nation women, we always found a way. And I think, one of the big challenges that we were faced against is, racism, discrimination, biases, perceptions and stereotyping. So we had to break that down as well because Aboriginal models weren't accepted in the Australian fashion industry. We were considered ugly. So, to break down those stereotypes and to create a platform for us to be seen, to be heard and to be celebrated, it was a really challenging time. But, we had our support from our Aboriginal controlled, organisations and they were there supporting us. And then eventually, we've got some money to I can go back and share a story. So we had the calendar produced. We had all the photo shoots done, but then we couldn't get any money to produce the calendars. So Dina and I were two Aboriginal women on the dole, going around making phone calls from telephone boxes and then walking into Aboriginal organisations trying to get, use their printer or their computer. But to get these calendars produced, we went to every bank manager in probably Brisbane asking for, a $10,000 loan to get the calendars printed. So knock back. Then we found one guy and he said, look, I'm not going to give you a loan, but I'll give you a credit card for the value of $10,000. And sure enough, it was the knockbacks, then one way or another, it could, deter you from your drive or your dream to achieve your goal. But I think for us, the resilience who we are, we were just determined to get this calendar printed and get it out there to give all our Aboriginal young girls an opportunity to be seen and to present beautiful Aboriginal role models for our girls.
Awesome. So you did touch on, that's early career. You've had that. You were going into a transition. you've made the decision, you're moving over to Perth. You've landed in WA, obviously on the other side of Australia. You've come from one sort of business operating environment. You've landed in Perth, and along the way you've kicked off SafeSpear. You've got Spear Foundation and Djeelya. Talk us through how that came to be, because obviously when you look at Aboriginal business, the IPP over that period of time coming into where we're at now, there's been a lot of change, and there's been, I would say, a maturing of the Australian industry towards engaging Aboriginal businesses, engaging Aboriginal professionals. People like yourself were obviously there early on, so you've come through that transition, I feel, into current day. How did you go with SafeSpear, and what did SafeSpear lead on to?
So SafeSpear is a company that Barry and I created, in 2008, I believe. And that company was all about promoting culture. Barry was an artist, so we were looking at ways of how we can, capitalise on his artwork. So producing T-shirts and putting it on, any various products. So it sort of came from that. But then at that time, we were experiencing and watching the mining boom here in WA, and we were just seeing all the celebrations and the success from, Aboriginal businesses getting really good contracts and delivering services to the market. So we were thinking, how can we enter that market? And because we knew quite quickly that T-shirts didn't make money, but it was great to promote, our culture and who we were. So we were thinking, how can we enter into the market? So there was many nights that Barry and I would set up, thinking and talking and strategizing, looking at all the other Aboriginal businesses that were currently in the market and what they were doing, because we didn't want to cannibalise the market, because most of the family here are Barry's mob. So it was about how can we bring something niche that was out of the box, that was different from stationery, pen and papers, or labour hire, or PPE. And then one night Barry encountered a fatality. So he was working for a mining company as well, because on the side we had our business. And with that fatality, tragically, a young man was killed in a crusher, and that, Barry was sort of traumatised by that. And then from that, the questions were, why wasn't he harnessed? Why wasn't he wearing, the required safety gear to protect him from that fall? So that's how SafeSpear Safety became about. Between Barry and then we were working with Many Rivers. So Many Rivers was a company that provided business support, and that's where we met our business partner, Francois Vitboy. So Francois helped us with the SafeSpear and the T-shirts. And the first time we ever met Francois, Barry said to him, we're going to be business partners. We're going to be doing, we're going to be working together and whatnot. But Francois turned around and he said, well, T-shirts don't cut it for me. So when we came up with the idea for the lifting and rigging and height safety component of SafeSpear Safety, and that's how the collaboration came about. By looking at the market and seeing, what other Aboriginal businesses were out there, we came into the market by being, Australia's first Aboriginal lifting and rigging business. So over the years, we worked really, really hard. We were walking and pounding the terrace, St. George's Terrace, where all the big shiny buildings are, where all the big boys are. So, many conversations, many coffees, talking to procurement, meeting, the Aboriginal Affairs team, talking to everyone that we could possibly do. And we could talk to the cows come home, because we had this dream. We were quite tenacious, and we had this drive of making this business successful. But when we did enter the market, it came out the fall of when the mining business had a turnaround. So we had our first business plan, and our first meeting was with Heath Nelson from FMG.
Yep.
So what we went out with was with these big capital height safety equipment, and Keith just looked at us and said, yeah, it's not going to happen in this market. So that's when we returned the drive of where we're driving the business to lifting and rigging. So 6 years on, and then we went into a joint venture with Starn Group, and that's when we created SafeSpear.
Yep.
So SafeSpear is another company or another arm to the Spear Group, and we were in partnership with them for about 18 months, and then we quickly, or a joint venture if you want to call it, then we quickly realised that our values didn't align, and we were quite staunch and strong in being Aboriginal businesses. We weren't one of those that were going to sit back and just allow them to tick the box, because we wanted to be a part of the decision-making process and ensuring that us as Aboriginal businesses had a proper seat, and to ensure that that joint venture partner was legit and real. And so within 18 months we brought them out. So that was probably, I believe we were the first Aboriginal business within Australia to buy out their first international joint venture partnership. Yep. So that was pretty much exciting for us. And and over the years, there's definitely been, business is a challenge every day. Yep. Every day you're putting out fires. So it's definitely been a really big journey, because, when we came back 14 years ago, it was really the start of Aboriginal businesses being in the market, and we were really, trying to make a change at the table with the procurement mob, and trying to sell our products and services. And it was quite frustrating, to continually have those conversations. It came to an analogy where we would just say, we're like any other corner shop. So all those corner shops sells Peter ice creams. Yeah. And we were saying we're just like that, but we're another corner shop selling exactly the same, the item, the same product. But it was, it was a challenge. But when you look at it, I think, us as, as an Aboriginal business, we were the frontiers in driving change and creating, those pathways, and negotiating, good terms, and, negotiating contracts. They would have these big contracts that were put out, and when we'd looked at the contracts, we could only service, a bit of that contract, and then, we, negotiated with them to do a different service agreement with us so we can enter the market. And I guess once we've done that, it was just a snowball effect, and we were quite happy, FMG, Andrew Forrest and Nicola, with their dream and what they did in allowing Aboriginal businesses, with the $1 billion project that they did for businesses to be entering into their space to service and deliver on their sites. They gave us our first contract. So we were pretty happy with getting that and servicing that. It was 250 items that we were allowed to, send to site. And that contract now, I think we've been delivering for about 8 years, and now that's gone to over 3,000 items, and also expanded to doing services, all the quarterly inspection services, height safety installations, fabrication, load testing, non-destructive testing. So, and I think from that platform, the journey's just increased and gotten better for us as Aboriginal businesses. Yeah.
A few things that I've just picked up on there, because obviously we've got, yourself and Uncle Barry, or what I would consider one of our more prominent Aboriginal businesses, not just here in WA, but Australia-wide. You've branched out, and you've got a footprint on the East Coast and further afield. So for other Aboriginal businesses, a few of the themes that I picked up, you were a first mover in your space as an Aboriginal business with the services that you're providing. You sort of studied the market to identify gaps in the market and how to approach that. You were agile. Obviously, business is not easy. Anyone that's in business can attest to that. You've had to navigate a changing business world. The industry that you're playing in or that you're servicing obviously is cyclical. So you've mentioned, that a couple of the businesses that you mentioned, they're obviously big players in the resource sector. So you need that support. So it's about identifying, being resilient enough to keep knocking on the doors until you get that opportunity. And then servicing the opportunity, right? And retaining it. With the, you did mention, and I was aware, when you did buy out your previous JV partner, because as an Aboriginal business person myself at the time, it was really exciting to see, right? Because I do remember it, that they were quite a big partner, a global partner. Going through that process, and now with some of the current topics out in the Aboriginal business world and just in the business world in general, how challenging was that to also maintain, because we know what the potential for JVs and partnerships, unincorporated JVs and all that sort of thing. How important was it to have the support of not only Uncle Barry, but people like Francois and your other allies within the business to stick to your values and not be railroaded, so to speak, by a bigger player? Because that can be stressful.
Well, you say we're punching
above your weight.
Punching above our weight.
Yeah.
We always did, I think, as a board, between Barry, Francois, Aaron and I, he's our other business partner as well, which we brought in to the SafeSpear venture that we embarked on. Yeah, it was always a journey, but we had to stay strong to our values and who we were as a company, and stay strong to our strategic vision and to our mission and what we believed. And I think, we wanted to stand true in terms of, because when we originally started Red Spear Safety, we did have an opportunity to go into a joint venture, but we chose not to do that because we wanted to, when Barry, Francois and I started Red Spear Safety, we had Francois, who's a classical pianist and a marketing degree. Then you had Barry, who's an artist. And then me, being fashion and an events coordinator. We had all these different, skill sets. But what we did have was this vision that we wanted to stay true to. But we chose to stay true because we wanted to be role models for, the other, startup Aboriginal businesses that were coming through. We wanted to be strong in the decision to stand, to say that we are capable as Aboriginal businesses to buy out our joint ventures. Truly, for me, joint ventures should be only an interim. There should be an interim of skills transferring to those Aboriginal partners to teach them, to make them understand the business world, allow them to drive their own self-determination and destiny in driving that business. So we wanted to be the forefront in showing that we were capable, because when we look at that journey back then, us as Aboriginal people, we were put in a box and we were suppressed. So it was, how do we break down those glass barriers that existed in front of us? And I think that decision was true for us to stand strong and to, believe in and stay, to our cultural values, to our business values, and to who we were as business leaders, that was the direction that we wanted to go. And, business is it's stressful, but it's fun.
Yeah. And So you mentioned fun. Obviously, we've touched on SafeSpear, RedSpear. There is another foundation which I sort of briefly, is it Djeelya?
The Spear Foundation.
You've got Spear, and what's the other?
From my community role, or the leadership role that I do, I sit on two foundations.
Yep.
So I co-chair the FISH, which is the Foundation of Indigenous Sustainable Health.
Yep.
I've been on that board for about 8 years. When I started on that board, and I guess one of the reasons why I wanted to be on that board, because I've got a passion in justice. I'm solution orientated. So when I see a crisis, I want to create a solution. And I saw FISH as that vehicle to be a part of, to help drive that passion that I have in making change for our mob that are in the justice space. So FISH, when I started, Mark Anderson headhunted me for that role. We had no money in the bank. So we had about $800, and then our CEO at the time, Mark, and director, he worked for the foundation for the first 3 years with nothing, so we couldn't pay him. But that was the drive as a board of building that foundation and driving the mission and our strategic plan where we wanted to drive to. And today, proudly, we're a multi-million-dollar foundation. Yeah. Also, the other foundation that I co-chair, and which is I'm one of the founders, along with Barry and Francois, is the Spear Foundation. I think as an Aboriginal business and as Aboriginal leaders, or as cultural leadership, we have a responsibility to help and to drive change, to give back to our community. And we wanted to share our profits. We wanted to share our dividends with our community, because that's what we do as Aboriginal people. We share. And so that's where the Spear Foundation came about. So I now sit as a director on the Spear Group company. I go to director board meetings, which my directors have allowed me to walk fully and solely into our foundation with our general manager to drive change for our community. So we have 3 really beautiful community impact programs. One is the Everlasting Elders, so strengthening our elders. They are the pinnacle of who we are. So it was about how can we share a space or create a culturally safe space that they can come in and, sit, yarn, enjoy themselves and rekindle relationships and connections, but also share a collaboration and a connection to our youth as well. So we also work with our local, high schools to bring those youth in to share that connection with our elders. So that's a really special program that we do. To date, we've probably got over 160 Aboriginal elders on our database, and we average anywhere between 30 to 50 elders at an event that we hold. 8 events every year, ranging from boot scooting to pamper days to art workshops to on-country experiences to Christmas, having Christmas events. So the elders, it's something that they can look forward to, every 6 weeks that they've got an event to come to and just come and enjoy themselves. We also have the Smiling Child. When you look at the current state of our economy, it's not really good. There's people out there that are struggling, and with the Smiling Child, we support those schools that are just above the poverty line, and we help primary school kids go to, get their stationery, get their uniforms, go to camps, or, we just don't want those kids that don't have it to miss out. And I think that program came about with Barry and Francois being one of those kids that didn't have the opportunities is. And I think Barry's quite traumatised because he got to miss out on him and his family were living in Calabarin, and they had this school excursion where all the kids in the school got to travel to Perth to go to the Peter ice cream factory. And unfortunately, my Barry's, mum and dad couldn't afford for him to go. And he was one of those kids that had to sit back in the classroom doing, other work and watching all those other kids jump on the bus, and then coming back after, a great successful trip, talking about the ice creams that they had. So as a kid, that's quite traumatising. So we wanted to ensure with the Smiling Child program that every kid, regardless of, what nationality, because poverty is not racist, had an opportunity to go to school and be a part of that culture and be a part of what every other kid has. And thirdly, the other program that we have is the Djeelya program, which is my baby, my vision. And that was about creating a program where our young Aboriginal girls have a platform or a pathway for a life of being free of poverty and having economic independence. So it's focusing on young women 15 to 18 that are engaged in the justice space, but it's early prevention and intervention that we're targeting, because I think when you look at the current state of our justice system, or within Australia, we don't inject a lot of money into early intervention and prevention, but we've got to be smart on what type of programs that we create, because we don't want to be wasting money, because we want we want an outcome where these girls are leading into employment, and we're setting them up, we're giving them skills to be that independent, strong, career-minded, culturally strong women. And that's what we've got. So we're launching that. I've got this incredible, amazing, our other board member, Dawn, and, she shares the same drive and passion with me, and her and I are just a match made in heaven that are really going out, changing the narrative of justice and how we, bring a cultural solution and building a bridge between the justice system, the community and us in closing the gap. And taking down just making something tangible, creating hope, and, showing our girls that there is something, more than, being a life on welfare or having babies and, being in a relationship from domestic violence or being homeless. We want to show these girls, these, young ladies that, plant the seed that they can be more. And with Djeelya and the village that we created, we're going to wrap around them, and we're going to show them that, that destiny, and that, the dreams that they have, that their dreams are achievable. Because I had a dream. I wanted to be a businesswoman. And, at that time, Aboriginal kids couldn't even finish school. But that was something that I wanted to, break those statistics and go forward and being a role model and being proud of who we are and not being, stereotyped and having all that negativity and racism that's faced. But we are, we come from, walking on the shoulders of giants, of ancestors that have worked before us, that we can, have this pathway of being poverty free.
Very busy. There's some really amazing stuff there. I was aware of, obviously I know about the Everlasting, the elders group, and I know a fair few of the old girls that go along, and they talk, they always talk very highly, and they look good with when they're doing their makeup and they're being pampered and all that sort of stuff. And I think sometimes along the way, it's easy to forget how important it is to put back into the community. And so to hear some of the work that you're doing, it's really refreshing. And, before we start to wind it down, you touched on earlier, so you've sort of come full cycle through the last 20 odd years of Aboriginal business. You did touch on some stuff early on from a global perspective. Obviously, the businesses that you're in now are quite prominent. Has there, going to the next level, or have you had exposure? Is there expansion, or working with DFAT and some of the government organisations around Indigenous trade globally? Is there anything like that on the plans for you guys? What does that look like?
We do provide services internationally. So we are, as SafeSpear, we do go overseas and do services. So for us, we are in that market. Obviously, I've just come back from a trip with India.
So it's happening.
It's happening. I went, oh God, I've got a mind blank. But so we went to India last year, and I was in a group of 8 other Aboriginal businesses, and we went over to India, which is now becoming the new China. And checking out all the services and how we can be a part of the international trade. So I think for us as Aboriginal businesses, we are in time now for us to start looking from an international outlook and start having, the drive to export and also import as well. So there is a market, and we have to go out there and try to make a
case for it.
Make a case.
No, look, I sort of there are a few businesses here or in Perth and Australia wide that are really starting to tap into the global market, and I think the reason I ask that is for some of our Aboriginal businesses and Aboriginal professionals that are starting to kick off. Some of that stuff you don't think is achievable, right? So when you're starting off your business, when you were putting together your calendar, you would never have thought probably 20 years later you'd have 2 or 3 foundations. You'd be doing community stuff. You're a first mover with safety in an area that Aboriginal businesses weren't historically playing in, and then all of a sudden, you're doing trips with internationally. So it's sort of it's a big full circle, really, and.
It's a proud moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I was this young Aboriginal girl, having this dream of being a businesswoman, and to come here and actually say every day I wake up, I live my dream.
Yeah. Should be very proud.
Thank you.
Next steps. Obviously, you're very busy. You've got a few ventures that you mentioned that are, Djeelya, and you're wrapped up in the foundations with community. Mm-hmm. Next 5 years, what's that look like for
retiring?
The group? Retiring, yes.
No. Next 5 years, I think, obviously we're just, expanding SafeSpear. We've re-looked at our strategy. We've reshaped, redesigned our business services. So just really continually to build that on a national platform and looking at more international services. From a Spear Foundation with Djeelya, it's looking at building a social, economically enterprise to drive a long-term sustainability where we're not relying on government funding or, grants or anything like that. So definitely my next 5 years is focusing on building Djeelya and building that to a national platform, not only having, Djeelya in Perth. I would love to see it expand to Northern Territory and Queensland within the next 5 years, but then driving and building a social enterprise that brings in, multi-million dollars, building, really good, strong partnerships with global brands to allow that space for us to, generate that funding to ensure that our girls that are engaged in the justice space have an outlet to change their direction in life and to change their lives. So doing that, but definitely probably sitting on a few more boards. But, yeah, sharing my experiences. I'd love to go around and work in community organisations, community groups, sharing, women's group, helping them build businesses, from a community social enterprise space as well. So, yeah, I think, I've walked in both worlds as a cultural woman, as a woman in the corporate world. And I think that I was put on this, planet to learn, but then to, as an Aboriginal leader or culture leader, we've got to go back and give back to our community and strengthen and create, a strong community, strong people, which creates strong culture, which, helps drive the crises that we face currently within our economy and within our communities.
And finally, any words of advice for any of our Aboriginal entrepreneurs, business people, our young women that are listening, from your perspective as someone that's been walking the journey, for 20 plus years?
I always go by this quote: if it is to be, it's up to me. So anything with your goals and your dreams, it's up to you to chase and follow those dreams. Can't rely on anyone else. So it's up to you. If it is to be, it's up to me.
Perfect. Thank you. That was pretty inspiring. There's some things there that I personally have learnt, and I'm sure some of our, a lot of our listeners will take on board. Really appreciate you giving us your time today, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, listeners.
So thank you. A big thank you to everyone that's listening. I just want to reiterate, again, big thank you to Liza. Having somebody of her calibre here today, we're very privileged. Also want to give a big thank you to Aviso Specialty, our foundational member, foundational sponsor, for supporting First Nations News, and a big thank you to Yellowgate, who's also a sponsor partner with us. Again, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. And we'll see you in the next one.